We would like to begin with the Local Government Committee in room 447. So all the absent members, if you would go ahead and make your way down. Also would like to announce that Assemblymember Monning will be replacing Assemblymember Solario at our hearing this morning. It looks like we do have a quorum, so if we could please establish a quorum by calling the roll.
Smythe.
Here.
Smythe here. Caballero. Arambula. Here. Arambula here. Bradford. Here. Bradford here. Cotto. Davis. Knight. Here. Knight here. Logue. Here. Logue here. Monning.
Thank you. A quorum is established. We have 4 bills, I believe, up, and our first item is item number 1, Senate Bill 959 by Senator Duchesne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. This bill attempts to recreate the Office of Permit Assistance within our existing Office of Planning and Research, noting that the Office of Planning and Research is evolving into a different entity through reorganization, but that office or its successor in the governor's office to provide a streamlined, more efficient permitting process to facilitate timely project approval, particularly for businesses. The legislation, we hope, would help small businesses be able to get started in a more efficient way. I remember in the 90s when we really had offices of permit assistance before they were done away with in the 2002 budgets, and they were very effective for many in helping that process move forward expeditiously, mitigate confusion, and we really need at the state level to say all our different departments, look, there is some timelines. You can't give different contradictory regulations for a water permit and an air permit, and at the same time what we've tried to do is incorporate local permitting into the process. We worked with local government opponents in the Senate and took several amendments, including one that eliminated residential, which was really never our focus in the first place, but there was some confusion that it included residential permitting. That's obviously a sort of a different ballgame, both for cities and for counties. We have made clear now that it is commercial and industrial permitting only that we're trying to get at, and hope that this committee can support it. We recognize that there is a late opposition from the League of Cities, who we had worked with, but we have taken many of their amendments, both to provide fee authority because they had some concern about the ability to comply, and to exclude cities under 100,000, which is pretty much like 3/4 of their universe. So we have tried very hard to work with them, but nonetheless acknowledge that we have received opposition from them today.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition. Friends from the League.
Bill Higgins, League of California Cities. I'd like to acknowledge all the work the Senator's office has done with us. This is one of those situations where Sacramento staff does what they think is a good idea, and then your policy committee still says no. So I am here to express the opinion of 50 local officials who still say no.
Thank you. Any other opposition? Tweeners?
Kiana Bess, California State Association of Counties. Just wanted to note to the committee that we've removed our opposition with the June 22nd amendments and remain neutral on the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses? Seeing none. We have a motion and a second. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Senator?
Thank you very much. Members, we do hope this will help improve our business climate and make it easier for businesses to start in California. Ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Committee on Natural Resources. Smythe.
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Caballero. Arambula. Arambula, aye. Bradford. Aye. Bradford, aye. Cotto. Davis. Knight. Knight, aye. Logue. Logue, aye. Monning. Bills.
That measure is out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Next item, number 2, SB 1006, Senator Pavley.
Good morning.
Morning.
We ready? All right, very good. A member, Senate Bill 1006 is a simple and common sense bill to help California communities prepare and adapt to changes we are already experiencing. The local governments at all times have total control of whether they wish to incorporate, modify, ignore any of the cost-effective strategies that could already be sent by the Strategic Growth Council, which is an existing agency. That Strategic Growth Council was a bill authored by Darrell Steinberg that was approved a couple of years ago. Assembly Bill 1006 simply provides info to local governments at no cost to them. This bill also amends eligible applicants for grants to JPAs and special districts. The need for our communities to find ways to adapt to climate change is clear, but many do not know what their options are and do not have the tools. As a former local government official in a small city, this is particularly true of the smaller cities who don't have the staff to spend a lot of time on looking at different options. Senate Bill 1006 simply directs the existing Strategic Growth Council as part of its work to provide information to local governments about sustainable growth to include information on how to adapt to these changes. These are not regs. These are not guidelines. They're not recommendations. It's just information. The Strategic Growth Council, again, under Senate Bill 732, already has the authority to provide information to local governments on climate adaptation. This bill simply provides information that includes strategies that enhances natural ecosystems that are cost effective. Under this bill, the Strategic Growth Council authority is simply clarified and the direction made explicit. It does not add any new responsibilities to the council or any new costs. This bill will give the Strategic Growth Council the role of becoming the clearinghouse for information to local governments for their consideration of different kinds of climate adaptation strategies. This bill requires absolutely nothing of local governments. It merely provides information. There is no policy guidance associated with this bill or any implication that the state is recommending a specific course of action just by merely providing alternatives and information. It is critical because many, if not most, local governments in the state do not have the resources to get this information. Once local governments have information on possible strategies, they can make their own decisions with full public hearings and discussions on how they want to proceed as they go through their individual planning processes. The bill respects and enhances the ability of local governments to make their own decisions about how to adapt to the natural changes they are experiencing. Without a strategy to do so, local governments will be more vulnerable to the human and economic costs of natural disasters such as fire, floods, droughts, and pests. This bill provides a needed service at no additional cost, and I have with me sponsors of the bill and other supporters.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Louis Bloomberg. I'm the director of the California Climate Change Program for the Nature Conservancy. We are pleased to be here in support of the bill as a co-sponsor, and we'd like to thank Senator Pavley for authoring this bill, for all of her leadership on climate change, and for her comprehensive and compelling presentation of the bill. Just a couple of quick points, and to reiterate, this is an important bill. By enacting the bill, the legislature will help local government respond to the costly and potentially devastating impacts of climate change. This bill will make more resources available to local government in terms of planning and potentially grants, and expand the pool of local government and regional agencies that would qualify. SB 1006 ensures that the data and information provided by the Strategic Growth Council will assist local governments in planning activities that will protect the environment, capitalize on the ability of nature-based solutions to adapt to climate change, and minimize new greenhouse gas emissions. For these and all the other reasons that you're going to hear about and have already heard, we support the bill and urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you, Chair and members. Reed Addis on behalf of Audubon, California, here in support of the measure. Quite simply, we are just trying to provide information to local governments. We're using a existing state agency that's already having to provide information to local governments about sustainability. We're just suggesting that they pass on information about adaptation. One comment I will make, because it's possible you'll hear from opposition today regarding several items. We already took amendments, the author rather took amendments for the measure related to guidelines and removed the language guidelines, so we were very clear that all we're doing is providing information. There is also discussion about other types of work on adaptation. One organization referred to as the CAP. It's possible that they will provide a report on what to do with adaptation. We simply see that something like the CAP, that information would be provided by the Strategic Growth Council to local governments. So finally, I'll just mention that there's also an important technical cleanup in the measure that allows joint powers authorities to qualify for Prop 84 grants through the Strategic Growth Council. That was an oversight when the measure was first passed, and that's a technical cleanup here in this measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Pamela Flick from Defenders of Wildlife, and on behalf of more than 140,000 members here in California, we urge your aye vote on this measure. We're proud to be co-sponsors, and thank Ms. Pavley for this important bill.
Thank you.
Hi, Chair and members. This is Connie Galippi on behalf of Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, which is a joint powers authority in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Michael Endicott, Sierra Club, California, in strong support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses to add in support? Thank you. Witnesses in opposition. If we could have make some room.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Matthew Harg with the California Business Properties Association. We've been working with staff pretty hard on this bill, and we have some lingering concerns with it that we'd like to share with you today. First and foremost is we believe that this bill is just simply unnecessary and redundant of current law. In the author's testimony, Senator Pavley stated that the SGC already has this authority to provide this information, and we agree with that. We don't think that needs to be put in statute that they provide that information, because when you do put it in statute, it gives providing that information, we believe, elevated credibility, which the bill then doesn't address, with making sure that certain processes are put in place to make sure that the information that they're providing is indeed accurate and helpful. Such things as there's no vetting process in the bill now. As we understand it, the process, the SGC simply can find climate adaptation information from wherever it wants and provide it to local governments without it going through any type of review process. We believe that providing that type of information will elevate it a bit and could potentially provide more hooks for lawsuits under CEQA for when projects are moving forward. If the SGC has provided information on climate adaptation that your project potentially hasn't incorporated in there, then we believe that that's another avenue of approach for somebody suing a project that they don't like. Finally, we believe that we already have to look at this type of information under the existing CEQA processes. We don't really want to build buildings that are going to be submerged in water in 10 to 15 years. So we already have to consider that under CEQA. And lastly, we'd like to say that we do believe that climate adaptation is something that does need to be dealt with, and we do believe that this bill does address an issue that we hope will be addressed. But with some of these processes that we talked about, a vetting process, a public input process, we've suggested to the author that they look at something like the SB 97 process from 3 years ago that laid out some very clear guidelines for connecting land use planning with greenhouse gases. And with that, appreciate your time, and thanks to the author for working with us on this.
Thank you. Next witness.
Good morning. Cassie Gilson on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. The objection is not to dealing with climate adaptation, and the objection is not to giving local government information. The problem is that when you deal with global warming and climate change, nothing is simple. And we've watched that play out on the greenhouse gas side of the house with the way we deal with greenhouse gas under CEQA. And the problem exists with adaptation as well, which is that there are right now no rules, no laws that tell individual project proponents or local governments when they're doing general plans and regional planning documents, how is it that you're supposed to deal with climate adaptation? When I'm dealing with sea level rise, what's the amount of sea level rise I'm supposed to assume will occur for purposes of this plan or project? So the need that Senator Pavley outlines is absolutely there. I think the objection that CBIA has is that we are seeing challenges in existing CEQA context over the way the projects and the plans deal with adaptation. And the governor put out an adaptation strategy, and it contained a lot of the kinds of information that the Strategic Growth Council might give to local government. The problem is that it wasn't vetted. It was, I think, arguably one-sided, and these are issues about which reasonable people can differ. And there's nothing in this bill that says, you know, the information provided to local governments has to be both sides, has to be presented so that the local government can see what different views of the process would be. So I think as a practical matter, we've been trying to work with Senator Pavley and her staff, who have been very helpful. And the solution from our perspective is to make them guidelines, because even though they took the words guidelines out of the bill, when you're a Superior Court judge, you're going to look at the Strategic Growth Council, the governor's executive agencies, and say, this is about as authoritative a group as I have, and it also comes with the imprimatur of the legislature pursuant to this bill. So rather than do that, why don't we pursue formal CEQA guidelines? And as you are aware, CEQA comes with a guidelines process. They provide vital information to local governments and project proponents doing their plans, but they also come with an Office of Administrative Law process so that you have some public hearings, some review of the information that's going. And so it's not objecting to giving the local governments the information. It's just making sure that they're getting a reasonable perspective, because reasonable people can differ over whether the answer is don't grow at all or grow to meet specific building standards the way we do with floods and fires and earthquakes now, or somewhere in the middle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Brenda Coleman here on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce. I echo the comments made by both Mr. Hargrove and Ms. Gilson on this issue. We too believe that adaptation is an important issue that needs to be looked at. Unfortunately, we are concerned that without the lack of a proper vetting process, as stated by my previous two colleagues of mine, that this could potentially have some unintended consequences of stalling or pushing back on certain projects. And quite frankly, in this economic climate, we don't need the potential threat of projects being hindered in any way. So we will continue to work with the Senator and her staff and look forward to addressing certain issues that we have, but we too must remain opposed or are opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Other witnesses in opposition? Thank you. We have some tweeners. Okay, fair enough. Right, we do have a motion and a second on the bill already. Are there questions from the committee? Yes, Ms. Caballero.
I have a question. Senator, the issue has been raised in regards to the public process, and I wonder if you could just address that particular issue.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that question, Assemblymember Caballero. Information from the Strategic Growth Council, particularly on adaptation, is something they couldn't do under the auspices of sustainability. It's just a whole bunch of list of strategies that local governments may want to consider or may want to ignore. There would be a complete vetting and public process if the local governments wanted to adopt any of all these strategies. That is the appropriate venue. In some entities, some of these strategies may work. In some local governments and other communities, they do not. And there's other approaches. Other organizations, other agencies will be sending additional information. So this is just one tool in a toolkit of land use planning strategies that local governments could consider. Again, if they wanted to amend their planning documents or whatever they have, full public hearings are required, full vetting, full analysis. That's the point of this bill, just providing information.
One follow-up question, if I could. The concern appears to be that that there's an elevated, to use the word that was used, elevated credibility in terms of these particular, I call them guidelines, but they're really recommendations, as I see, or maybe you've got a better word for it. And I guess that's the issue. Do you see this as having a higher level? And I really, this is important because as we move into looking at CEQA, the more that we can protect how it provides an opportunity for local government to really analyze all of the impacts on the community, but then has the flexibility to choose among different options is very important. And there's a heightened concern here, I think, about litigation, and that's obviously something that I'm concerned about as well. I want to make sure that whatever local government does, as long as they follow the process and there's good facts behind their decision, then they're protected. And the decision is protected, and the project can move forward with some degree of certainty. And so I wondered if you could address the issue of the legal issue as well.
I'll try to do that, and maybe I'll ask for some of the sponsors to assist me in that if you don't mind. I wanted to go back a minute, and the Strategic Growth Council can address issues of sustainability and provide information. That's already existing law. This focuses on part of sustainability, and that's adaptation. This makes local governments eligible for potential money, state or federal dollars that assist them in land use planning concepts or ideas. This bill particularly specifically only provides information. It's nothing formal like regulations, guidelines, or recommendations. It's just information. When I was bringing this through the state Senate, the big question was, is this voluntary for local governments, whether they wanted to implement any of this? Absolutely voluntary. And then there's the full vetting process that deals with any kind of specific application of development. I see this just as a tool for local governments to consider. Is there smarter ways, for example, to look at multiple benefits of stormwater capture and rainwater capture to maximize water going into the aquifers? Just sort of smart growth kinds of things, but again, works for some communities, does not work for others. Full flexibility, just a list of strategies and concepts and ideas that may have been used successfully in other places that can be ignored by the Planning Department, Planning Commission, or City Council.
Mr. Loeb?
Yeah, I'm of course, surprise, I'll oppose this bill. I agree with the testimony against it, that the bottom line is that this is just not needed. And I don't know if this panel understands it or not, but the greenhouse gases in California are the third lowest in the nation. We're already there. And it's time for us to start listening to the people in this state that create wealth and jobs. And they're all lining up against this bill, and there's a reason for it. So, we have 12.5% unemployment. The rest of the country is running away from this as fast as it can. Even Australia is trying to get away from this formula. So my urging here is let's stand with jobs today, and let's make that first step. We can't afford to basically move forward on science that hasn't been proven. The Earth for the last 12 years has been getting cooler, and that's a fact, bottom line. The ice cap in the Antarctic has grown 43% since 1980. So is global warming real? Is it not? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I know there's 31,000 scientists that say it's not, but I'm not one, so I'm not here to say that's the case. But I can guarantee you one thing, that we're out of work and we're out of jobs. And if we're ever going to turn the state around, we have to put this type of legislation just on hold. Let's see what happens. Let's try to get our economy healthy again. Listen to the people who create jobs. They're trying to tell us something. The direction at 12.6 is way too high. We have to stand with the working people so we can quit laying off 30,000 teachers. This is the legislation that is putting a dagger in the heart of jobs in California. So I have the greatest respect for the senator, and I believe with all my heart that she's doing everything she can because she believes that it's true and correct, and I respect that. But for God's sakes, there has to be an end to this, because the people are going to rise up and say, you know what, why is California going this alone? We're the only state in the country doing this to its people. So I oppose it.
Any other questions? Mr. Rambula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to summarize the testimony that I heard, the information is good. The need is there. and there may be some potential consequences. I think we sort of teased those out, but those are not squarely before us today because it's strictly informational. And the other concern I heard was that it was unnecessary and redundant. I don't think that's the case with this bill, but even if it were, that would knock out a good portion of our workload, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's...
You don't mean this committee, though, right? I mean,
no, of course not.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
By the time they get to our committee, it's in good shape. I represent an area that has seen the consequences of the early melt of the snowpack. And that does have an impact on the ability of people to work. And we need to adapt to changes that the consensus is clearly saying are going to occur. And it's not so much, well, to me, I'm starting to see greater variations in or fluctuations in the climate. And I think we need to be prepared for those for the sake of working people, for the sake of folks that care about the environment. So I'm prepared to support this bill.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Senator Pavlik?
Yes, one of my sponsors is dying to say something.
If you would like to defer, if you would like to defer some of your time, absolutely.
And then I'll do a briefer
Thank you.
close. If
Thank
that's
you. Fair enough. Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reed Addis on behalf of Audubon, California. I just wanted to make 3 clarifications. The Strategic Growth Council is a state council, and it has to operate under a public setting, publicly noticing. It works under Bagley-Keene. So anything it does has a public review process related to it. 2, the Strategic Growth Council already in statute has to provide information on climate change to communities. We just think it's, for lack of a better word, silly that we're providing information on climate change, but not adaptation as well. And so therefore, we don't believe there's any legal issues here. It's just simply providing additional information to local communities. Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you very much. And Assemblymember Caballero, one of your questions was sort of answered by him, which I thought was really important, in that the Strategic Growth Council, which is already required under law to look at sustainability, just not adaptation, and provide information to local governments, they also have a public process for review and vetting and all that. This particular bill is not about particularly California and AB 32 or anything like that. Whether you believe it's human-caused or not, there seems to be something going on with the climate that could last years, whatever. So should we be looking at adaptation strategies, smart growth strategies that'll save local governments in the state money in the long run? Should we be concerned about increases of wildfires? What can we do to be a little smarter in preparing and preventing those? Maybe it's additional setbacks of clearance of brush, whatever strategies there are. Should we be concerned, like Mr. Arambula said, about long periods of drought and chaotic weather patterns? Absolutely. And how can we accommodate to make sure that we have enough water for our agricultural industry as well as urban water users? What are some of the smarter things local governments can do to maximize conservation? So there's a variety of good information that could be shared with local governments, purely optional if local governments chooses to implement any of the strategies through a public process that's vetted and under all the rules of the law that go with planning. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. We do have a motion and a second. Please go ahead and call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Committee on Natural Resources. Smythe?
No.
Smythe, no. Caballero? Caballero, aye. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Bradford? Cotto? Cotto, aye. Davis? Knight? No. Knight, no. Logue? No. Logue, no. Monning? Aye. Monning, aye.
All right, that bill is 1 vote short. It is on call.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next item, item number 3, Mr. Price, SB 1341.
Is CNN going to join us today, Mr. Price? Or?
I was just practicing for today, just a warm up. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank you and staff for working hard. I know this hearing is accommodating bills, mine's amongst them, and I do appreciate it. AB 1341 will allow small firms who subcontract with a certified firm and who are seeking to do business with the LA Metropolitan Transportation Authority to receive a 5% bidding preference. The bill would also grant a 5% bidding preference to the lowest responsive and responsible bidders who are certified as small business enterprises. Finally, the bill would require the lowest responsive and responsive bidders or best value proposers to use good faith effort to meet the goals relating to the participation of small business enterprises. As we know, small businesses are the foundation of our economy and workforce, generating more than 70% of all new
Chairman, I'll move the bill.
private sector jobs. We've worked with the Associated General Contractors and the American Council of Engineering to mediate and address their technical concerns. It's made the bill more effective. For this reason, SB 1341 has received broad support, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chairman and members, Michael Turner on behalf of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. We're the sponsors of the measure. We just urge your support for the reasons stated by the Senator.
Thank you. Others? You're up.
Mr. Chairman, members, Dave Ackerman representing the Associated General Contractors. As the author stated, we had earlier concerns. Those have been taken care of with the amendments that are in the bill now. We currently have a memorandum of understanding with the Governor's Office on assisting small business with public works contracting, and this bill is consistent with that memorandum of understanding, so we ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? It has been moved in second. I just have a quick question maybe about if the folks at Metro or even the others talk about, just kind of address the concerns about, Prop 209 and some of the anti-discriminatory laws that are part of that. And if someone could maybe just address how that's being dealt with there.
Good morning, members of the committee. Richard Chastain from County Counsel's Office in support of the bill. Addressing that issue, this bill, SB 1341, is purely race neutral. It doesn't address any issues connected to Prop 209. It's race and gender neutral, and it's just providing a preference for what has been designated as small businesses. So,
all right. Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Mr. Becker.
I just want to commend the Senator for moving in this direction with almost $40 billion worth of corridor money that's going to be available to the MTA. It's vital that we make sure, as Mr. Logue says, that folks go back to work. So giving small businesses a chance or bite at this apple is key, and making sure that people aren't employed. Small businesses employ over half our workforce, so it's key that they have opportunity here. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
And this is a lot, obviously, was kind of predicated by the passage of Measure R, I assume as well, that helped kind of facilitate, because we want to get those projects through the queue and moving as quickly as possible, I assume.
That's true, yes.
Right, great, thank you. All right, yes, Caballero.
I just want to commend the author for an incredible list of supporters. It's good to see a lot of supporters and no opposition. It makes our job a lot easier, but it is a good bill, and I really appreciate you bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Please call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Committee on Transportation. Smythe. Aye. Smythe, aye. Caballero. Caballero, aye. Arambula. Arambula, aye. Bradford. Aye. Bradford, aye. Cotto. Cotto, aye. Davis.
Aye.
Davis, aye. Knight. Knight, aye. Logue. Logue, aye. Monning. Aye. Monning, aye.
Thank you. That measure is out.
Thank you.
Thank you. While we're waiting for authors, or for our final author, if we could lift the call on item number 2, SB 1006, Senator Pavley. The current vote is 4-3.
Bradford. Bradford, aye. Davis. Davis, aye.
All right, that measure is now out, and I believe we're on hold for Senator DeSaulnier. It did, yes, yes. Hi, and there, just in time. I've never seen so many tan suits in one.
Yeah.
It's white suit day.
Yes.
It is white suit day. And all right, this time we'd like to add begin with item number 4. It's SB 1445. Senator DeSaulnier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You look so natural there. SB 1445
yes, I do.
is, yeah. not going to say anything, Anna. This is a bill that I've given a try at a few years. Basically, it does two things. I believe it better coordinates both from local government, regional government, with the Strategic Growth Council and the Planning Advisory and Assistant Council. So it adds membership from the regional COGS, and then it also adds important membership from CARB, CTC, and other state agencies. So you have better integration, communication between those agencies and regional government as to land use and transportation and the implementation of SB 375. And then the second part, which has been more difficult to deal with, is how do you generate funds so that the COGS and the MPOs can actually do their sustainable growth and their regional planning at that level as provided in SB 375. So last year we suggested a $2 or $3 fee that would be approved at the regional level. There was opposition to that from SANDAG and other regional local governments and from the governor's office. So the governor vetoed that. In his veto message, he said that he didn't want a patchwork. He wanted, if he was to consider signing it, he wanted something that was statewide. So that's what we did here. We lowered the fee to make it less objectionable to $1, and then we said it would be effective statewide. So that's our attempt, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time and turn it over to our witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, move the bill.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. First witness.
Jerry Jaffe, representing CalCog. Just quite simply, if you'd like to see a full implementation of SB 375, the MPOs need a permanent dedicated source of funding. It's that simple. The other thing is there's issues about whether this bill costs money or not. In fact, you have one of the members of this committee who's involved with the ballot measure. It does save money, and because with better planning in transportation, housing, and land use, it means decrease in miles driven, less pollution, less gasoline, better housing patterns, better commuting patterns. That saves money, and you can't do that without planning. And the MPOs, if they are mentioned, if they were to fully implement 375, need the funds to be able to do this. Secondly, for the cities to make the changes in their general plans and zonings, they need good, solid planning from the MPOs. And if you don't provide those funds, they can't do the proper, good, solid job. So as a result, this kind of bill is needed, and it's very important. That's why we have introduced and urge your support.
Thank you.
Michael Arnold, representing the Association of Bay Area Governments, strongly in support for the reasons previously stated.
Good morning, Chair Smith, members of the committee. Rebecca Long with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for the Bay Area, also in strong support. We would just echo the point that, SB 375 was excellent legislation, but without a funding source to implement it both at the regional level and to provide supports to local government to update their plans, it's a hollow shell, and this bill is really needed to make it effective. Thank you.
Thank you. All others, just please name and association and position.
Michael Encott, Sierra Club, California, strong support for planning and the money.
Reed Addis, on behalf of the California Infill Builders Association, we are in support with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Connie Galippi, on behalf of Tree People and California Relief, in support if amended.
Thank you.
Graham Brownstein with Transform, very strongly supportive.
Sonia Halterman on behalf of the Planning and Conservation League in support.
Thank you. Witnesses in opposition.
I'm fine. Oh, Gene.
We're just going to sit right next to you there.
Surrounded by my favorite people.
Somebody forgot a bag.
Gene Urban, on behalf of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, we're opposed. We don't describe SB 375, by the way, as a hollow shell without money, but we are opposed to the money. It raises $1. We're opposed. We think vehicle owners and operators have already contributed and will continue to contribute disproportionately to greenhouse gas objectives. Since the bill has been introduced, I've already seen fee inflation. There's a bill on the other side by Assemblymember Maw that would go to $4. So in a period of just 2 or 3 months, I congratulate the proponents from going from $1 to $4. Where does it stop? How elastic is this concept? The findings in the Maw bill are identical to the findings in the Desaulniers measure. So the findings are pretty elastic. It could easily be $6, $8, $10, $12. You just substitute the number and you change no findings. We're opposed. Let me tell you one example why. 2 years ago, we worked constructively with then Speaker Nunez to increase by $1 the registration fee for an enhanced vehicle retirement system. Owners and operators of vehicles have been paying that since July 1st of 2008. 2 years ago, we will have raised between $50 and $60 million. Ask me how many vehicles have been retired under that program. 0. None. The government has $50 to $60 million collected for a purpose we supported. They've yet to retire one vehicle, which would contribute to both air pollution, greenhouse gas reduction, and safety. So until we have some understanding of how this is going to be spent, it's not going to be increased in a breathtakingly quick manner. Before it's even law, there's a bill on the other side to increase it fourfold. We're opposed. Thank you.
Bill Higgins from the League of California Cities, and I'm largely going to cancel the opposition that was just said, because our opposition is make it $3.
Exactly.
Because the local agencies, that if you're going to fund, 375 funds regional agencies, but those regional plans aren't going to accomplish anything unless you fund the local dollars. Since we've adopted 375, local governments have seen redevelopment and transportation money dwindle, two sources that we absolutely need to implement 375's promise. We're, with this position, calling the state's bluff. If you want us to do 375, fund it. $3 is our opposed unless amended position, and we look forward to working with the senator.
How about you?
We're opposed. We're opposed if amended. We're opposed if amended.
I'd like to commend Senator Desaulniers for bringing people together. Only he can.
That's a real challenge.
It is.
To bring
It is.
Gene
You guys,
and the league together.
You have a lot of talent to do that. I do believe we have probably one more witness in to support. Very good. Okay. Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, Mr. Arambula, first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will support the bill because I think it's good policy. In the San Joaquin Valley, we have some of the worst air quality in the nation. We have 1 out of every 6 children that suffers from asthma and other respiratory illnesses. Many of those are affected by excessive vehicle miles traveled. I think if we can come up with a better housing jobs balance, if we can encourage livable communities, if we can find a way to reduce the reliance on vehicles. Some of my constituents say, I don't want to have to burn a gallon of gas to get a gallon of milk. And I think that there are smarter ways of doing things. The Maw bill, as I understand, it gets to the same point, but in a different manner. I think it requires approval by the Board of Supervisors and by the voters in that area. So to increase the likelihood that one of these bills will get signed, I will support the senator's bill, and hopefully that will result in the necessary resources to implement what I think is good policy.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Davis?
I support the bill, but I was curious with one of the opposition remarks in terms of needing to increase. What is your thought about their comments, and do you find a need to work with them?
Well, as I said in a previous bill, we had the higher amount. So anytime we all are familiar with this, anytime we move one way, we pick up some opposition. So we're trying to be sensitive and get the minimum impact on consumers, but still get the resources to local government, regional government to start to do their job. And to the creep issue that Gene brought up, I'm going in the opposite direction. I came down as opposed to going up.
Yes, Mr. Logue.
Yeah, I oppose this bill, and concerning health and air quality, it's interesting that nobody talks about the lifespan of a Californian who doesn't have a job. They determine that they lose about 5 years off their life. So this is just another bill to allow us to live up to our reputation as tax and spend California, take more money away from the private sector, put it in the government. SB 375 is a perfect example of, I guarantee you, if it's not suspended, we will hit 25% unemployment rate. So if we want to keep people, families working and healthy, we want to put them back to work. This, by raising taxes, is contrary to exactly what the people of California said last year by a 2/3 vote. I just don't know if we're ever going to get it, but what we're not here to do is to fight over a shrinking pie. What we need to do is increase the pie. This is just another step of having us fight over a shrinking pie. Let's put people back to work, let's grow this economy, and let's just get out of the way. Because if we do that, we won't have to worry. We'll have the funds to implement SB 375. The reason we don't have it is because we don't have the jobs to implement it. And so, as a result, and I have our senator's the greatest respect. I know that his heart is in the right place on this, but I just can't support it. So.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other? Thank you. Senator Sonia, you may close.
I would respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Very good. I do believe we do have a motion and a second, so let's please go ahead and call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Committee on Transportation. Smythe.
No.
Smythe, no. Caballero. Arambula. Arambula, aye. Bradford. Cotto. Cotto, aye. Davis. Davis, aye. Knight. Knight, no. Logue. Logue, no. Monning. Monning, aye.
All right, that measure is one vote short. Committee members, that is our last item of the day, but we do need to remain in a quorum and give a few minutes for the absent members. So if the sergeants could please track down the absent members. Thanks for bringing it together. Actually, I should have gone first.
Sure, that would help.
Pretty much the first one out is okay. Watch me leave.
If I could have everyone's attention very quickly. Okay, we're going to lift the call on last item, SB 1445. Please call the roll.
Caballero. Bradford.
Okay, that measure, yes, Ms. Caballero.
I'm not going to let Mr. DeSaulniers' bill die in this committee, and so I'm willing to support it, but I have some concerns about it for the floor, just so you understand that I'm willing to give you a courtesy vote for today's hearing. So it's an aye.
Caballero, aye.
That gives the bill 5 votes. That puts it out. We will leave the roll open for another 5 minutes for any add-ons. Other than that, our business is done.